The first time I saw the little girl, she ran straight into my husband's arms and shouted, "Daddy!" I remember freezing so completely that the grocery bag slipped from my hand and crashed onto the parking lot. A carton of eggs shattered at my feet, but I barely noticed. My husband, Daniel, looked up, his face draining of color as though every drop of blood had disappeared in an instant. The girl couldn't have been older than 6. She wrapped both arms around his waist with the kind of comfort only a child feels with a parent she completely trusts. Then a woman walked over, smiling warmly. "There you are," she said to Daniel before noticing me. Her smile faded. For several unbearable seconds, none of us spoke. Daniel quickly pulled the little girl behind him. "You weren't supposed to be here," he whispered. "Not to me, to her." My heart started pounding so violently I thought I might faint. The woman looked between us before quietly asking, "You never told her." "Told me what?" I stared at my husband of 11 years, the man I had worked double shifts beside. The man I had supported while he claimed his business was struggling. The man who constantly reminded me we couldn't afford vacations, a bigger house, or even to start trying for a baby because money was too tight. Yet somehow, a little girl was calling him daddy, and judging by the way she held his hand, this wasn't a secret that had started yesterday. This had been going on for years. Daniel grabbed my arm. "Claire, please, I can explain." I slowly stepped backward. "No," I whispered, "you'd better explain everything." Because in that single moment, my marriage was already over. I didn't wait for his explanation. I turned around and walked away before my legs gave out beneath me. "Claire!" Daniel shouted behind me. I kept walking. The little girl's confused voice drifted across the parking lot. "Daddy, who's that lady?" Those 6 words hit harder than anything I'd ever heard. Daddy. Not Uncle Daniel. Not Mr. Daniel. Daddy. I reached my car with trembling hands and fumbled for my keys. My vision blurred with tears before I'd even started the engine. Daniel caught up just as I locked the doors. He knocked desperately on the window. "Please, just let me explain." I stared straight ahead. For 11 years, this man had kissed me goodbye every morning, told me he loved me every night, and held me whenever I cried because we still couldn't afford fertility treatments. Now every memory felt poisoned. When he realized I wasn't opening the door, he stepped back. His shoulders slumped. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked afraid, not guilty. Afraid, I drove home without looking back. The silence inside our house felt unbearable. It was the same little 2-bedroom home we'd bought 8 years earlier, because Daniel insisted it was all we could afford. "We need to save. We have to be responsible. Maybe next year," I believed every word. While my friends remodeled their homes and took family vacations, I worked overtime at the hospital. Every bonus, every tax refund, every extra paycheck went into our joint account. "Our future," Daniel always said. I laughed bitterly. Whose future? Certainly not ours. An hour later, the front door opened. Daniel walked in slowly. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged 10 years during the drive home. "I know how this looks," he said quietly. I laughed. "You know how this looks?" He nodded. "I've made terrible mistakes." "Mistakes?" I stood so fast my chair scraped across the hardwood floor. "Forgetting our anniversary is a mistake. Buying the wrong groceries is a mistake. Having another child is not a mistake." He closed his eyes. "You don't understand. Then help me understand." My voice echoed through the house. "Who is she?" He stayed silent. "Who is she?" Finally. "My daughter." The room seemed to spin. I grabbed the kitchen counter to stay upright. "How old?" 6. 6 years. For 6 years, he'd lied every single day. "What about the woman?" "My ex." "Ex," he nodded. "We dated briefly before I met you." "That's impossible. We've been married for 11 years. He swallowed hard. "I found out she was pregnant after we got engaged." I stared at him. "You found out before our wedding?" "Yes." The air left my lungs. "You married me anyway." "I thought she'd moved away." "You thought?" "She contacted me after the baby was born, and you never told me." I was scared. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So instead of telling your wife the truth, you built another family?" "It's not like that." I slammed my hand on the table. Don't you dare tell me what it's not like. I just wanted to help my daughter. With our money, silence. That silence answered everything. My stomach turned. How much? Daniel looked at the floor. Daniel, I don't know. I laughed again. This time it sounded almost insane. You don't know? I never kept track. I walked into the home office, opened our filing cabinet, pulled out every bank statement from the last 6 years. Daniel followed behind me. Claire, I ignored him. One by one, I spread the statements across the dining table. Hundreds of transactions, small withdrawals, $300, $450, $800, $200. Always cash, always unexplained. I had trusted him so completely that I'd never questioned them. Now I started adding the numbers. After 20 minutes, my calculator displayed a figure that made me physically sick. $186,000. I stared at the screen. Nearly $200,000. Gone, our retirement savings. Our fertility fund, our dream home, everything. I looked up at Daniel. My voice was barely audible. Tell me I'm wrong. He couldn't, instead. He whispered the words that destroyed the last piece of my marriage. I was paying for both households. I felt something inside me snap, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. Like a thread finally breaking after years of tension. I took off my wedding ring, placed it carefully on the table beside the bank statements. Then I looked him directly in the eyes. You have exactly 1 hour to leave this house. His face turned pale. Claire, if you're still here when that hour is over, I'll call the police. He opened his mouth to argue, but one look at my face told him I wasn't bluffing. Without another word, he turned toward the bedroom to pack. I stood alone in the dining room, surrounded by years of lies neatly printed on bank statements. And for the first time, I realized I had no idea who my husband really was. Daniel didn't argue. That scared me more than if he had. For 11 years, every disagreement ended the same way. He'd defend himself, twist the conversation, or somehow convince me I was overreacting. But now, he simply walked upstairs. I heard drawers opening, closet doors sliding, suitcases rolling across the hardwood floor. Each sound felt like another nail in the coffin of the life I'd believed I had. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I opened every financial folder we owned. Taxes, insurance, mortgage, retirement accounts, credit cards. If he'd hidden one family, what else had he hidden? 40 minutes later, I found something that made my blood run cold. A credit card I'd never seen before. It wasn't in our joint account. It was in Daniel's name only. The balance, nearly $48,000. My hands began shaking. Every month, the minimum payment came from our checking account, hidden among utility bills and insurance withdrawals. I had never noticed. I flipped through the statements. Furniture stores, children's clothing, toy stores, a pediatric dental office, a dance academy, an amusement park. Disney tickets. I stopped breathing. Disney. For years, Daniel had told me vacations were irresponsible. The last time I'd suggested going to Florida, he'd smiled sadly. Maybe when we're in a better place financially. He'd already been there, just, without me. The front door closed upstairs. Daniel appeared carrying 2 suitcases. He looked at me standing in the dining room, then his eyes fell on the credit card statement in my hand. His face went white. You found it. I nodded slowly. You took your daughter to Disney. Silence. You bought her bicycles. Silence. You paid for dance lessons. More silence. Then I whispered the question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. Did you ever want children with me? Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Of course. Don't. I raised my hand. Don't lie to me anymore. He swallowed. I was afraid. Of what? That if we had our own child, and I'd never be able to support both families. The words hit me like a truck, not because they hurt. Because they were honest. For the first time in 11 years, he wasn't lying. He carried the suitcases toward the front door. Before leaving, he turned around. I do love you. I stared at him. I believe you. Hope flashed across his face, then I finished. But apparently, you love everyone. That hope disappeared. He nodded once. walked out, closed the door behind him, and just like that, my husband was gone. The silence afterward was unbearable. I wandered from room to room. Everything reminded me of him. The coffee mug he'd used that morning, his jacket hanging near the entrance, the picture from our 10th anniversary, us smiling on a beach, looking happy. I picked up the frame, studied his face. How many lies was he carrying even then? How many weekends had he spent with them while telling me he was working overtime? How many birthdays had he celebrated twice? How many Christmas mornings had he lived two completely different lives? I suddenly couldn't breathe. I collapsed onto the living room floor. The sobs finally came, violent, uncontrollable, ugly. I cried until there were no tears left. 3 days passed. Daniel texted constantly, "I'm sorry. Please let me explain. Can we talk?" I ignored every message. Instead, I called a divorce attorney. Her name was Rebecca Lawson. She listened quietly while I explained everything. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Claire, I've handled divorces for 23 years, but I've never heard one quite like this." I managed a weak smile, "So I'm special." She didn't smile back. "No, you've been financially deceived." She pulled out a yellow legal pad. "I need you to answer one question honestly." I nodded. "Do you think he's told you everything?" I almost answered yes. Then I remembered the hidden credit card, the secret withdrawals, the lies. "I don't know." Rebecca nodded. "Good, what?" Most people in your position still trust their spouse. They believe the affair is the whole story. She looked directly into my eyes. "It rarely is." A chill ran through my body. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, if he managed to hide an entire family for 6 years, he's probably hidden much more." That afternoon, Rebecca hired a forensic accountant. His name was Victor. 2 days later, he called me, "Mrs. Harper, I think you should come in." His voice sounded unusually serious. I drove there immediately. Victor had stacks of documents spread across his desk, color-coded, highlighted, organized. He looked exhausted. "I've spent 18 hours going through your finances." And he took a deep breath. The money wasn't just going to another family. My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" He slid one document across the desk. A property deed, different address, different city. Owner, Daniel Harper, purchased 4 years ago. I frowned. "We don't own another house." Victor looked at me sadly. "You don't." "He does." My mouth went dry. "There are mortgage payments every month, property taxes, insurance, utilities, all paid." He paused. "From your joint income." I stared at the address. Daniel hadn't just been visiting another family. He had bought them, a home, and somehow, I had paid for every single brick. I stared at the property deed for what felt like an eternity. There had to be some mistake, some legal explanation, some investment I didn't know about. "This can't be right," I whispered. Victor gently slid another folder toward me. "I wish it weren't." Inside were utility bills, electricity, water, internet, home insurance. Every statement carried the same address. Every payment came from our joint checking account. The home had 3 bedrooms, a fenced backyard, a 2-car garage. The monthly mortgage alone was nearly twice what we paid on our own house. I suddenly understood why Daniel always said no whenever I suggested remodeling our kitchen. Why he insisted we couldn't afford a newer car. Why every discussion about having children ended with, "Let's wait until we're financially secure." We had been paying for 2 lives. One with me, one without me. Victor cleared his throat. "There's something else." I almost laughed. "There's more?" He nodded. "I found dozens of payments to a private elementary school." I frowned, but his daughter looked 6. "Exactly." He handed me another document. Enrollment form, student name, Olivia Harper father, Daniel Harper mother, Sophia Bennett. I couldn't breathe. Harper. She carried his last name, not mine. Not some random surname, his. I looked at Victor. "He told me they weren't together." Victor sighed. "I don't know if that's true, but according to these records, they've presented themselves as a family for years." That evening I drove to the address. I didn't know why. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I wanted to torture myself. The neighborhood was beautiful. Tree-lined streets. Children riding bicycles. Families walking dogs. It was everything Daniel always claimed we couldn't afford. I parked across the street. 5 minutes later, a silver SUV pulled into the driveway. Daniel climbed out. Then, the little girl jumped from the back seat laughing. "Daddy," he smiled, a real smile. One I hadn't seen in years. He scooped her into his arms. She wrapped her tiny hands around his neck. Behind them, the woman, Sophia, walked toward the front door carrying grocery bags. Daniel kissed the top of Olivia's head, then reached over and took one of Sophia's bags. She smiled at him, not awkwardly, not nervously, comfortably, like people who'd done this 1,000 times before. I felt physically ill. This wasn't a man helping his child. This was a husband coming home. I drove away before they could see me. Halfway home, I had to pull into a gas station because I couldn't stop shaking. I sat there gripping the steering wheel until my phone rang. "Rebecca. I've got another update." I closed my eyes. I'm almost afraid to ask. "Daniel filed something 3 years ago." "What?" She paused. "A life insurance policy." "So, Claire, you're listed as the secondary beneficiary." I frowned. "Who's the primary?" Silence. Then, "Olivia Harper." My heart stopped. His daughter inherited everything before his wife. Except, I wasn't really his wife anymore. I was just the backup plan. The next morning, Daniel called from a new number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Claire." His voice sounded exhausted. "You've been following me." "No, I've been finding the truth." Silence. "I never meant to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "You built another family." "I know. You spent almost $200,000. "I know. You bought them a house." Another long silence. Finally. "Can we meet?" "No, please. No, I owe you the truth." I closed my eyes. The truth would have been telling me 6 years ago. Then I hung up. 2 days later, someone knocked on my front door. I assumed it was another delivery. Instead, I found Sophia standing there. The woman from the parking lot. She looked terrified. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her eyes were swollen from crying. "I know you hate me," she said quietly. "But please, can we talk?" Every instinct told me to slam the door. Instead, I stepped aside. She walked in cautiously. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't know about you." I stared at her. "What?" She nodded. "Daniel told me that his wife died 8 years ago." The room spun. "What?" Tears rolled down her cheeks. "He showed me a wedding photo. He said he couldn't bear to take it down. He said you died from cancer." I felt sick. Sophia reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, opened an old picture. There it was, my wedding photo, the same one that used to sit on our living room shelf. Only now, someone had placed a black ribbon over the corner, like a memorial picture. "He told Olivia you were an angel," Sophia whispered. "She thinks you're dead." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I realized something even worse. Daniel hadn't just lied to me, he had lied to both of us. And suddenly, for the first time, I wasn't looking at the other woman. I was looking at another victim. I couldn't stop staring at Sophia. For the past 3 days, I'd imagined 100 different versions of the woman who'd helped destroy my marriage. A homewrecker, a gold digger, someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Instead, she looked just as shattered as I felt. "I need you to tell me everything," I said quietly. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I met Daniel 7 years ago." "Where?" "At a charity fundraiser." My stomach tightened. That fundraiser. I'd been scheduled to attend with him, but ended up working an emergency double shift at the hospital. He'd gone alone. "He told me he'd lost his wife to cancer," Sophia continued. "He wore his wedding ring because he said taking it off made him feel guilty." I laughed bitterly. "So he played the grieving widower." She nodded. "For months, he refused to date me. He said he wasn't ready." I thought it was sweet. My chest burned with anger. Every lie he'd told me. He'd turned into a different lie for her. "When did you find out about me?" I asked. Sophia swallowed. "The day at the grocery store." "So you truly believed he was single?" She looked directly into my eyes. I would have never built a life with a married man. Something about the way she said it, I believed her. Then she reached into her purse again. I brought something. She handed me a thick envelope. Inside, hundreds of photographs. Daniel at birthday parties, Daniel carving pumpkins, Daniel teaching Olivia to ride a bicycle, Daniel decorating Christmas cookies, Daniel holding Sophia while they watched fireworks. 7 years of memories. One photo stopped me cold. Daniel was standing in front of the house I'd helped pay for. Olivia sat on his shoulders. Across the bottom of the picture, someone had written, "Our forever home red." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. Forever. While he'd been telling me we couldn't even afford to replace our leaking roof. I confronted him after the parking lot, Sophia whispered. He admitted everything. What exactly did he say? He cried. I rolled my eyes. That sounds like Daniel. He said he'd always planned to tell both of us. When? She gave me a sad smile. He couldn't answer that either. Of course he couldn't. There was never going to be a right time to confess living two completely different lives. Sophia looked down at her hands. There's another reason I came. I braced myself. What now? I left him. I blinked. What? I packed our things yesterday. You left, she nodded. I don't know who that man is anymore. I can't raise my daughter with someone capable of this. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, respect. Just then, her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, her face drained of color. It's Daniel. Answer it. She hesitated. Then pressed speaker. Where are you? Daniel demanded. I'm out. You went to see Claire, didn't you? Silence. Sophia. I know you're with her. Neither of us spoke. His breathing grew heavier. You don't understand. I finally interrupted. No, Daniel, you don't understand. Silence, then, Claire, yes. Another long pause. I never wanted you two to meet. I noticed. You've ruined everything. I laughed. I ruined everything? No, Daniel, you did that all by yourself. He lowered his voice. Please, both of you, let's talk. Sophia shook her head. I'm done talking. She hung up. For several minutes, neither of us said anything. Finally, I asked. What are you going to do now? She sighed. I honestly don't know. I quit my job after Olivia was born. My name isn't on the house. My savings are almost gone. Daniel had controlled everything. Money, property. Decisions. It sounded painfully familiar. Then something occurred to me. When you said the house wasn't yours, she nodded. It's entirely in Daniel's name. So if he wanted, he could throw us out tomorrow. Exactly the way he'd emotionally trapped me with finances, he hadn't just been living two lives. He'd been controlling both of them. That evening, Rebecca called. I've got news. I'm almost afraid to hear it. The forensic accountant finished tracing Daniel's finances, and there are 3 investment accounts. I knew about one. You only knew about one. I closed my eyes. How much? Rebecca took a deep breath. Just under $8 million. I nearly dropped the phone. What? He started investing nearly 10 years ago, using money from both households. But here's the interesting part. The accounts were never disclosed to you. So there. Hidden marital assets. I sat down slowly. Daniel hadn't just stolen from me. He'd been secretly building a fortune, while convincing both families they were struggling. Rebecca's voice became calm and deliberate. Claire, this changes everything. How? If we prove intentional financial fraud, the divorce won't just be about ending your marriage. It could completely change the settlement for the first time since this nightmare began. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about justice. And for the first time, Daniel Harper had something to lose. I ended the call with Rebecca and just sat there in silence. $8 million. For years, I'd clipped coupons, skipped vacations, worked Christmas shifts, covered extra hours because Daniel insisted we were barely getting by. Meanwhile, he wasn't just supporting 2 households, he was quietly building a fortune. I walked into our bedroom, my bedroom now, and looked around. The cheap furniture we'd bought because he said solid wood was a waste of money. The 10-year-old mattress he'd refused to replace. The cracked bathroom tiles we'd learned to ignore. Every sacrifice suddenly felt like another lie. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca, "Do not confront him yet. We need him to think you know as little as possible." I replied with one word, "Understood." The next morning, Victor called. I found something unusual. I grabbed my notebook. "What is it?" "There have been regular cash withdrawals." "I know." "No." His voice became more serious. "These weren't for Sophia." "What do you mean?" "There are payments going somewhere else." My stomach tightened. "A third account?" "I don't know yet, but every month, $500 disappeared, for almost 5 years. I frowned. "So where did it go?" "I'm still tracing it." When the call ended, I stared out the window. A third secret? How many lives had Daniel been living? That afternoon, there was another knock at my door. This time, it was Daniel. He looked exhausted. His beard had grown in. Dark circles framed his eyes. He held a small envelope. "I know you don't want to see me. You're right. I just need 5 minutes. You've had 11 years. He lowered his head. "I deserve that." I crossed my arms. "What do you want?" "I came to apologize." "You came because you got caught." His face tightened. "No, I came because I finally realized what I've done." I almost laughed. "You realized it in a grocery store parking lot?" He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me the envelope. I wrote everything down. "I'm not reading it." "You should." "No." I placed it back in his hands. "If you have something to say, you can say it in court." I closed the door before he could respond. For several seconds, I heard nothing. Then, his footsteps slowly faded away. That evening, Sophia called. "I think you need to know something." "What happened?" "Daniel came to the house." "I thought you left." "I did. I only went back to collect the rest of Olivia's clothes." She paused. "He wasn't crying anymore." "What do you mean?" "He was angry." Cold chills ran through me. He kept saying, "Claire is trying to take everything from me." I frowned. "Everything?" "He said if you pushed him, he'd make sure neither of us got a penny." That sentence echoed in my head. Not "I'm sorry," not "I ruined everyone's lives." Just money. Even now, that was all he cared about. 2 days later, Rebecca called an emergency meeting. When I walked into her office, Victor was already there. Neither of them looked happy. Rebecca closed the conference room door. "We've confirmed where the missing money went." I sat down. "And?" Victor slid another document across the table. It wasn't a bank statement, it was a birth certificate. I frowned. "This isn't Olivia." "No." Child's name, Ethan Harper father, Daniel Harper mother, unknown. My mouth went dry. "What is this?" Victor spoke quietly. "Claire, we believe Daniel has another child." The room went completely silent. I stared at him. "No." Victor nodded slowly. "The monthly payments weren't going to investments. They were child support." My entire body went numb. "So, you're telling me he wasn't living 2 lives?" Rebecca finished the sentence. "He may have been living 3. I couldn't speak. Everything I'd believed had collapsed once already. Now it was happening again. 3 families, 3 women, 3 completely different versions of the same man. How had no one noticed? How had I not noticed? Rebecca leaned forward. "We don't have all the answers yet, but we do know this. If Daniel committed fraud while hiding marital assets, if he lied under financial disclosures, and if he's supporting multiple undisclosed dependents, the judge will not be sympathetic. For the first time since my marriage exploded." I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry, cold, focused, determined. Daniel had spent years controlling every narrative, every dollar, every lie. Now, the truth was finally catching up to him, and this time, he wouldn't be able to talk his way out of it. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. Not because my life had become easier, because something inside me had changed. The woman who'd begged her husband to tell the truth was gone. The woman who woke up that morning wasn't looking for answers anymore. She was looking for justice. 3 days later, Rebecca called. Court ordered Daniel to submit every financial record from the last 10 years. I smiled for the first time in weeks. "And he doesn't know we've already found most of them." "Good. He'll either tell the truth or commit perjury. Either way, he was trapped." The first divorce hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. When I walked into the courthouse, my heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Daniel was already there. He looked nothing like the confident businessman I'd married. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His shoulders were slumped. He hadn't shaved. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered every night I'd cried because I believed we couldn't afford IVF. Every overtime shift. Every birthday he'd missed because he was supposedly working. Every dollar he'd stolen from our future. The sympathy disappeared. Daniel slowly walked toward me. "Claire," Rebecca immediately stepped between us. "My client isn't interested in speaking without counsel present." Daniel nodded. "I understand." Then he looked directly at me. "I never stopped loving you." I met his eyes for only a second. "You loved whoever was standing in front of you." Then I walked into the courtroom. The hearing lasted almost 4 hours. Daniel's attorney argued that he'd only been trying to support his daughter. Rebecca stood, calm, prepared. She placed 3 thick binders on the judge's desk. "Your Honor, this case isn't about one child. It's about years of calculated financial deception." One by one, she revealed the evidence: the hidden credit cards, the secret house, the undisclosed investment accounts, the forged financial disclosures. The judge's expression hardened with every page. Then Rebecca held up one final document. The defendant transferred marital assets into undisclosed accounts while simultaneously claiming financial hardship to his wife. Daniel's attorney objected. "Speculation," Rebecca smiled. "It isn't speculation. It's documented." She handed the records to the judge. The courtroom fell silent. Then, something unexpected happened. A woman walked through the courtroom doors. I didn't recognize her. Neither did Rebecca. She looked nervous, holding the hand of a little boy. Maybe 4 years old. She quietly whispered something to the court clerk. The clerk walked over to the judge. The judge frowned, then looked toward Daniel. "Mr. Harper, do you know this woman?" Daniel's face instantly lost all color. "Yes." The courtroom became silent. The judge nodded toward the witness stand. "Ma'am, please come forward." She slowly walked to the front. The little boy stayed beside her. She raised her right hand and took the oath. "My name is Natalie Brooks." Rebecca looked confused. "So are we," the judge asked gently. "How are you connected to Mr. Harper?" Natalie took a deep breath. "I'm the mother of his son." A wave of whispers spread through the courtroom. I looked at Daniel. He couldn't even look at me anymore. Natalie began crying. "I only found out 2 weeks ago that he was married." My stomach twisted. "He told me he was divorced." She glanced toward me. "I'm so sorry. I would have never." Her voice broke. "I would have never dated a married man." I believed her, just like I believed Sophia. Daniel hadn't found women willing to help him cheat. He'd found women willing to believe his lies. Rebecca slowly stood again. "Your Honor, I'd like the record to reflect that this is now the 3rd household financially connected to Mr. Harper." The judge looked genuinely stunned. "Mr. Harper, is there anything else your wife should know today?" Daniel closed his eyes. For nearly 30 seconds, no one spoke. Finally, he whispered, "No." The judge leaned forward. "I sincerely hope that's true, because if another surprise appears, I'll be referring this matter for criminal investigation." Daniel didn't respond. He simply lowered his head. For the first time since all of this began, the man who had controlled 3 different lives had completely lost control of his own. The courtroom was silent. No one looked at Daniel anymore. They were looking at the wreckage he'd created. 3 women, 2 children, 1 marriage, years of lies. The judge slowly removed his glasses and looked directly at Daniel. "Mr. Harper, I've presided over family court for nearly 20 years. I've seen affairs. I've seen hidden bank accounts. I've seen people lie, but I've rarely seen deception." Carried out on this scale, Daniel didn't respond. His attorney quietly whispered something to him. He simply shook his head. For the first time, he had nothing left to say. Rebecca stood once more. "Your Honor, we'd like to amend our request." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Requesting reimbursement of every marital asset transferred without my client's knowledge. plus punitive damages, plus attorney's fees, and weed. Like this court to refer the financial records to the district attorney for investigation into fraud and tax violations. Daniel's attorney immediately objected. The judge raised a hand, objection noted. Then he looked back at Daniel. Mr. Harper, did your wife know about these accounts? No. Did she know about the second property? No. The investment accounts? No. The other child? Daniel's voice. Correct. No, the judge sighed deeply. I don't believe this marriage failed because of one mistake. I believe it failed because of thousands of deliberate decisions. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. The judge awarded me nearly 70% of the marital estate. Daniel was ordered to reimburse every hidden transfer he couldn't legally justify. The secret investment accounts were divided. The hidden property was sold. The proceeds were split according to the court's ruling. On top of that, the IRS opened an investigation into years of undisclosed income and suspicious financial transfers. Rebecca called me the afternoon everything became official. We won, I smiled. No, we survived. Daniel tried calling several times over the next few weeks. I never answered. Instead, he mailed me a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a text. A real letter. Inside, he admitted he'd spent years convincing himself he could keep everyone happy, that every lie had required another lie. That eventually, he couldn't remember which version of himself was real. He ended with one sentence. I never deserved your love, but I hope someday you'll remember the man you thought I was. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, then dropped it into the fireplace. Some memories weren't worth keeping. A month later, I met Sophia for coffee, not because we were best friends, because we'd survived the same storm. She had found a new apartment, started working again. Olivia had adjusted better than anyone expected. Natalie joined us halfway through. She'd filed for child support and moved closer to her parents. The three of us laughed at how unbelievable our lives had become. At one point, Sophia looked at me and smiled. You know, I used to think you were the enemy. I smiled back. So did I, then we both laughed. Daniel had spent years keeping us apart. The truth had brought us together. 6 months later, I finally took the vacation I'd dreamed about for years. Italy, a place Daniel always insisted we couldn't afford. I walked through the streets of Florence eating gelato, watched the sunset over the Arno River, and realized something strange. I hadn't thought about him all day. Not once. For years, my entire world had revolved around a man who was never fully present. Now, my life finally belonged to me. Nearly a year after the divorce, I received one final phone call. It was Rebecca. You'll want to sit down. What happened? Daniel accepted a plea agreement. For what? Financial fraud. He'll avoid prison, but he'll pay massive penalties. Remain on probation for several years and lose several professional licenses. I closed my eyes. Not because I was happy, because it was finally over. Justice hadn't erased my pain, but it had ended his ability to keep hurting people. Last week, I ran into Olivia by accident at a bookstore. She was holding Sophia's hand. She recognized me immediately. Are you Claire? I smiled softly. Yes, she looked at me for a moment before asking the question I dreaded. My daddy says he made a lot of mistakes. Is that true? I knelt to her level. Yes, but those mistakes were never your fault. She nodded thoughtfully, then wrapped her little arms around me. It lasted only a few seconds, but somehow. It healed a part of me I didn't know was still broken. People often ask whether I hate Daniel. The answer surprises them. I don't. Hate takes energy. And I'd already spent too many years giving him mine. What I feel now is peace, because the money came back, the lies came out, the truth won. And for the first time in a very long time, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a woman someone had betrayed. I saw a woman who had finally chosen herself.